What's up, squad? This is Brandon from the Bantu Sun. Thank you so much for joining me today. Once again, if you're on this channel, if you're following this channel, congratulations. You are once again ahead of the curve. So those that been watching, they know one of the things that I talked about was this continuous pressure on Russia since the fall of the Soviet Union, chip away at their allies, and now the West is in its strongest allies. It's already chipped away a lot of Central and Eastern Europe, which used to be part of the Soviet Union, and now they are making their way through the final holdouts, Ukraine being one of them. Never in a million years would people think Ukraine would have been a threat to Russia 30 years ago. It's basically held the position that the closest allies to Russia post the fall of the Soviet Union was Ukraine and Belarus. Now look at where we are right now. This is a age or a birth or a genesis of a new Ukraine, an anti-Russian Ukraine. And I said from this position, the West had the opportunity, and I think they will seize the opportunity to continue to put pressure on Russia for regime change, possibly. And they would do that by going through the Caucasus and through Central Asia. And they found the mechanism to do it through President Erdogan of Turkey. Now, President Erdogan, if you enjoy politics, if you enjoy watching the creativity, the resolve of people to develop their countries, President Erdogan, I think, have been one of the greatest, if not the greatest geopolitician that the world has seen in the last decade. 20 years ago, no one thought Turkey would be in the position they are in right now. Basically, Turkey is about to split, with the help of the West themselves, but they're basically going to split Russia from Europe, which has already been happening. So why do I say this? In the news recently, there was a kerfuffle in Russia, and not too much background has been given for what caused this, but there's been some gentlemen that are associated with the underworld, the Azerbaijani underworld that operates within Russia. These governments know what goes on in their countries, and there's always going to be some understanding with the underworld as various operators go to different countries. And basically what happened is Russia decided to pick up these Azerbaijanis operating within their country. Some people say it may be related to some convert dealings they had. Maybe they're working directly with the Azerbaijani government, or they were used as usurpers within Russia. For those that don't know, Azerbaijan, Israel, Ukraine kind of have understood alliance going on. So there's been some talk of these people either working with Israel to attack Iran or working with Ukraine, which kind of subvert what Russia's doing. Nevertheless, Russia picked up some Azerbaijanis that are well connected, and a couple of them passed away. And Azerbaijani has responded in extreme force, and they picked up some Russians that are operating within their countries, shut down a Russian TV station. And when the photos came out of the people they captured, they looked to be severely beaten. And Russia and Azerbaijan have been going back and forth with each other. And what this really is indicative of is the pressure that Russia is really feeling. And why do I say that? Azerbaijan, in comparison to Russia, is what you can consider a pipsqueak. It is relatively small. It's a 14th of the population. And Azerbaijan would not do such a thing to a member of the UN Security Council, but it does so because it knows it has the backing of Turkey. Azerbaijan, Turkey's two nations, one state, they're extremely tight. And just released in the news, the Armenian leader, Armenia is set to meet with Turkey. And there's been a recent corridor that has been approved, taken, that will connect Azerbaijan on the Caspian to Turkey. This is so important because now you're connecting Azerbaijan directly to Turkey. And one of the holdups was going through Armenia, and especially in the Nagorno-Karabakh situation. And this area is highly contested. You have Russia there, You have Iran. There's a lot of things going on. And finally, with the defeat of Armenia regarding this Nagorno-Karabakh region, with the help of Turkey, Armenia, who was supported by India and Russia in this situation, India, Russia, and Iran, but who none of them really gave them the sufficient support they truly needed to defend off the Azerbaijanis. So what happened is Azerbaijan won, and Armenia, seeing the right on the wall, have just conceded these rights, and obviously for good reason. Armenia is a relatively small nation as well in that South Caucasus region. They have Azerbaijanis to their east, they have Turks to their west, Muslim to the east, Muslim to the west. Armenia is considered one of the first, if not the first, Christian country, and you got the Islams or Muslims to the south in Iran, and of course they have Georgia, which is already aligned to the west. When I say aligned to the west, I'm talking about aligned with NATO, and Turkey's already aligned with NATO. So pretty much Armenia was surrounded. Russia had already failed them in the Nagorno-Karabakh situation. And Armenia has pretty much said, okay, if you can't beat them, join them. And I think they're trying to hold on to the sovereignty that in the history and tradition that they have in that country. And being pragmatic realists, they have come to terms or are seeking to normalize relationships with Turkey. And also what that's going to do is normalize stronger relationships with NATO, which allows NATO a bigger, stronger presence in the South Caucasus, which is what NATO has been trying to do for years. Remember John McCain, we are all Georgian now. NATO is extremely interested in that South Caucasus region because it kind of outflanks Russia on the southern border and that South Caucasus region. Now, this solves a lot of things for NATO, but it also solves things for Turkey. Turkey has positioned itself as the gateway between the Occident and the Orient. They are basically making themselves the energy corridor. They've done this by allying themselves with one of the great natural gas exporters, natural gas being a major, major import for Europe. They've aligned themselves with Qatar to the south, being a great ally to Qatar, a seriously great ally to Qatar. They have good relationships with Algeria, another great natural gas export market. And now they're able to leverage the energy resources of Azerbaijan through this new corridor. This corridor is going to connect directly to the Caspian. And guess what's on the other side of the Caspian? More Turkic states. This is where you get into another natural gas rich Turkish state in Turkmenistan. So you have Turkey kind of having direct access to Central Asia. And this is going to be some of our videos we talk about the great contention as Russia recedes in power, this great power play that's about to happen in Central Asia. And it's most likely coming down to the two players, Iran's sideline with this dysfunctional current political system they're doing. Iran has been proving himself to be feckless. Pakistani is aligned with China, and Russia is receding. And I think the true players that's going to come down in the Central Asia power play is going to end up being Turkey balancing interests and contesting with China in this part of the world. And that's going to be highly strategic for both of them. Nevertheless, it's very interesting considering that the Byzantines or the Greeks brought the Turks in as mercenary to help them with wars in the Anatolian Peninsula. Now the West and NATO is bringing the Turks in once again as mercenaries to deal with the Russian situation. I constantly talking about the relationship between Russia and Turkey is contradictory. As Russia becomes strong and wanes, Turkey wanes and becomes strong. So what happened was when Turkey was a sick man of Europe, the Russians became stronger and stronger and stronger. And obviously the Russians are being very strong with this war in Ukraine. But over time, through inflation, through expenses, and this chipping away from these multi-fronts that Russia have, whether they're dealing with the NATO in the Baltic, dealing with hawkish Poland on its border, dealing with Ukraine, a direct war in Ukraine, and now this political transition or more hostile or antagonistic relationship in the South Caucasus with Azerbaijan. Because the reason why Azerbaijan is doing this wants to say, of course they want some balance for the people that they lost in Russia, but they're also saying, Russia, you're no longer boss here. Like if this was the Soviet Union days, these what Azerbaijan has done to the Russians in their country would never have floated. But this is a change of structure, and of course, Erdogan and Putin act cordial. They act like they're friends, but deep down, Putin probably know the only inlet they have into NATO, the only people really listening to Putin in NATO these days with the help is Macron in France and Erdogan in Turkey. And I don't care what Erdogan says, but I know Erdogan don't really care because he's seeing as Russia is being isolated, as it is being ostracized in Europe, he's seeing the dividend come to Turkey. Europe needs Turkey more and more every day because of its energy connections and its geostrategic location. So it's going to be really interesting how this relationship continues to evolve. But the heavy hand that little Azerbaijan is dealing with Russia in a very direct way shows you that Azerbaijan knows it fully has Turkey's backing. And Turkey is looking for a excuse, really, especially now that NATO is pushing its commitment to 5%, which is double their prior rate, which is absolutely insane for a defense budget. Like, Turkey have access. The day Turkey, as I always say, the day Turkey joined NATO was the day Russia or back then the Soviet Union lost. And the fact, the Soviet Union should have tested that Article 5 immediately. Because now you get into a situation where Turkey's going to be too big to handle. And Turkey's been smart. They're not trying to get a nuclear weapon. They're not going to try to go crazy. What they are doing is militarizing and becoming an essential player in the connection between Europe and that Middle East, Central Asia, oil-rich region. So this is going to be continuously evolving, but to see this geographic game play out, this geostrategic game play out, is highly interesting, and there's a lot of capable sides here. But seeing the ups and downs is quite revealing, and it's quite obvious to see there is a change of balance in the power structure in the 21st century. Here comes the era you can say the Asian century, but it's also possibly the century of the red apple. So it's extremely, extremely interesting. Comment below if you have any insight. Like, share, subscribe if you enjoy the content. And until next time, take care. Bantu up.